All right, well, welcome everyone to the new carbon index and other exciting growth in the home energy rating industry. Before we get started, we want to thank our top tier sponsor, Mitsubishi, for their support. If you didn't know, Mitsubishi was rated #1 for most reliable central air conditioning system by Consumers Report in 2022. Ironically, a heat pump is not just an air conditioning system, so it was great to see a non-AC system take this. Very exciting. The other cool thing that they've just launched is their new 2023 products page. It focuses on all of their brand new products. So if you go to this special link we've created for you here and follow it along, you can see some of the new products that they have coming out that they are featuring, such as their higher efficiency on their mini splits, both and on their ducted air source heat pumps, dry mode within their, a new dry mode within their mini splits, new air quality filtration within their ductless systems, as well as a natural refrigerant for larger multifamily and commercial scale systems. So you can check that out and more at the link that we've provided you, Mitsu New 2023, and learn more. We also want to thank our second tier sponsor here, Build Equinox, featuring the Serve 2. They've just launched a larger system that we think can handle much bigger spaces and homes with higher heating and cooling loads. This is your all-in-one magic box system, which is focusing on providing smart, on-demand controlled ventilation, removing particulates when there is pollution in the air, and then reducing the ventilation needed when there's not. It also has built-in heat pump systems for heating and cooling, and has some dehumidification features built right in the United States, all on solar power. Check it out at Build Equinox Serve 2. So before we get into our session today, new carbon index and other exciting opportunities in the home energy rating index industry, I wanted to let you know the session here was brought to you by the Green Home Institute. The Green Home Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to empower people to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. Today, I will be your moderator. My name is Brett Little. This course is approved for multiple continuing ed units, including energy and health under our certified green home professional designation. AIA Health, Welfare, and Safety may make it applicable to your state-based design contractor license, and Passive House Institute US for certified passive house consultants as well. So again, before we get into it, it's important to remember when it comes to green building and green building programs and certifications, a lot of the things we talk about here, we want to help all homes, new and existing, transform to full green attributes. The reality is the driver behind all of this and the green building certification program, such as LEED for Homes, is reducing your carbon footprint. There's no hiding that. That may not be your main motivator for doing that, but reducing the carbon footprint through the energy efficiency programs is the ultimate goal. And even LEED mentions their energy and atmosphere program. One of the main intents of it, again, is to reduce carbon, which they believe is exacerbating human-caused climate change. So that's one of the goals. Like, let's just be up front with that. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. But how this ends up getting distributed in our programs when we're building new or doing major renovations is through the HERS index rating, which is focused on energy cost savings and energy efficiency and energy use reduction. So carbon hadn't always been on the forefront of that conversation, but they go hand in hand. When you reduce energy, you save money and you cut carbon. It's a win-win-win, but it's focused currently on energy. So as a reminder, the LEED for Homes program and other green building certifications typically hitch themselves to Energy Star certification, which is now being boosted through the Inflation Reduction Act for funding. So LEED requires that you meet the requirements of Energy Star certification. You don't have to certify, you just meet the requirements under their minimum energy performance. And that typically requires around a HERS index rating, which we're talking about later today through this session, of a 70 on average and 80 for major home renovations. Now, where you can score more points in LEED, and typically you can achieve enough points to hit the certified level at baseline if you're a net zero home, is by dropping that energy efficiency rating lower and lower, that HERS index rating lower and lower compared to the baseline under the annual energy use program. And so having a more energy efficient project, which again, we'll talk about the components of that and how that relates to carbon within this session coming up here. And also important is that the HERS index rating and energy efficiency also hit some of these other key areas that are really important that are outside just the annual energy use. And so at the top there, the HERS index rating is a great tool that produces lots of information on how to educate the tenants and homeowners about how their building is energy efficient and why it's energy efficient and how to operate it. And so that is a requirement of LEED. And so having an explanation of the HERS index when you're doing it is very important. Second, the HVAC startup credential required HVAC contractors to get certified for an extra point. Now there's a new commissioning pathway where the rater can commission and then boost the HERS rating instead of relying on the HVAC contractors to get that credential. So that kind of goes hand in hand as a trade-off instead of pursuing this pathway. And then lastly, having more water efficient distribution systems for the water heater is actually plugged right into the HERS rating and can help again lower points and be to some extent a 2-for-1 within the LEED rating system. So with that, I am super excited to welcome back Ryan Meares. I think, Ryan, this is maybe your third or fourth time on our show over the years. So it's always great to have you back to tell us what's going on and update us on the industry and help inform people. So Ryan, welcome back, and please take it away.
All right, thanks, Brett. Thanks for the invite again. I'm glad to be back, and thanks to everyone for joining. I'm going to go ahead and get my presentation loaded up. I've got lots to cover today, but I'll move through fairly quickly. So I'm going to touch first on the carbon index, and then I'll get into some of the data trends in HERS rated homes for 2022 report that we just released last month. And then finally, I'll touch at the end on some of the 45L tax credits, and then some lesser known mortgage incentives that not a direct incentive for necessarily for home buyers, but it is there for builders and for mortgage lenders. So before I kind of dive into that, I just want to go over, for those of you that are not familiar with what RESNET is. We're a national nonprofit founded in 1995. We're also an ANSI accredited standard development organization. So we develop standards on for energy efficiency, which is standard 301, water, which is standard 850, and then carbon is included in standard 301. And I'll touch a little bit on our embodied carbon later. And then we also have standards on inspections and testing, which are mostly within standard 380 or standard 310 for HVAC grading. We also have some non-ANSI standards that we refer to as MNHERS, or the Mortgage Industry National Home Energy Rating System Standard. These standards address the implementation of all of the other ANSI standards. So they touch on professional accreditations for HERS raters, for rating field inspectors, for HERS modelers, for HERS H2O raters, as well as requirements for quality assurance on ratings, and also software accreditation is included in those standards as well. RESNET is also a home certification organization for WaterSense labeled homes and also Energy Star new homes. We're also waiting approval for our HCO certification for Zero Energy Ready Home. We expect that to be coming very soon. So RESNET has a national network of certified professionals, in total about 3,200 across the US as of this month. That includes both HERS raters and rating field inspectors, as well as HERS modelers and HERS H2O raters. We also have about 100 accredited quality assurance providers. So those are the organizations responsible for providing the first level of quality assurance on all HERS ratings. So I'm going to start on the carbon index. The link you see here, you can use that link to get some more information on it. You can also download this infographic that you see on the right side of your screen. The carbon index is actually in addition to Standard 301. It was a change made to that standard originally to the 2019 version of Standard 301, which is the current version in effect for HERS ratings. It's also included in the 2022 version of Standard 301, which has not yet been implemented or required for HERS ratings. So it's an estimate of operational carbon emissions. Now, embodied carbon has been a very hot topic lately. RESNET is working on a standard for embodied carbon, but it's still very early in the process. We're just in the process now of gathering interested people who want to serve on that standard development committee. And so the development of that standard will actually kick off a little bit later this year.
Yeah, and to clarify, embodied carbon or upfront carbon is really the carbon in the materials, correct?
Yeah, exactly. The carbon that is included in the extraction, manufacture, transport of materials that are ultimately used in the construction of the home, as opposed to operational carbon emissions, which are in the occupancy of the home.
Yeah, I did have one question on that, so I'm glad you brought up embodied. I was curious, is one of the goals, so that, because what I've noticed is that a lot of the same inputs of materials go into systems, right? So it's almost like you have to input the materials in an embodied system, and then you put one in an operational system, and you're spending a lot of effort. Do you foresee a potential future where it kind of is capturing all that data based on one input in ResNet systems?
Yeah, we're certainly looking in that direction where ResNet software would be able to incorporate the embodied carbon standard, so that ultimately your operational embodied carbon is done in one software. Because I know there are a lot of softwares out there on embodied carbon, it kind of that have various functionalities in terms of estimating the embodied carbon emissions. Some of them are easier to use than others, but yeah, I do see it heading in that direction, and eventually kind of a carbon use intensity where we can account for the operational and the embodied carbon in one metric, right, which will allow builders, depending on what region you might be building and how clean the electric grid is there, you may be able to, trade off your embodied against your operational for, one kind of carbon intensity metric.
And do you know, typically, and I know this is probably way far down the line, but is it intended to include construction practices into that at all, or have you seen that before?
You mean like end of life type stuff, or waste?
No, I actually think I'm talking about, like, let's just use an example. Like, let's say all of the trucks used to build the home were electric and powered by renewables instead of gas, like that process, like the process of building it.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know that it's been considered yet. Our primary focus, at least initially, is going to be in just being able to use like EPDs to be able to estimate embodied carbon. But I think the construction practice side, in terms of emissions from trades and on-site, traveling to the site, and all those individuals involved in the construction process and what those emissions are, is outside the scope of our standard now, but I think it could be considered in the future.
Well, I know embodied is on everybody's minds, so I think I want to circle back to some other questions and conversations on it, but let's make sure we kind of get to the other items right now. And I promise you I'll get back to some of these ones. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, sure. And then one final thing to note here is that the reference home is an all electric home. And that's important to keep in mind as I go through some of the later slides, because you'll see the impact of using combustion fuels on the carbon index. So this is kind of high level. How does the carbon index work? So we use the standard 301 references NREL's Cambium database. From there, we use the hourly CO2 equivalent emission rates. These are forward-looking electricity generation projections, which go from 2025 through 2050. On top of the CO2 emissions, we use the calculations in the RESNET accredited software for the HERS index in terms of hourly energy use. So we couple the hourly emission rates with the hourly energy use estimates. And then there are some emissions factors that are included in there for combustion fuels. So if you're using natural gas, fuel oil, or propane, there's a set emissions factor for any of those combustion fuels. Now, the map you see on the right here includes, so all of those different colored areas are kind of similar to what you see on the EPA e-grid regions. They're not exactly the same, but it's generally kind of follows in line with the EPA e-grid regions. And then you have these balancing areas. So all of these little numbered white circles there are the balancing areas. There's 134 of those. And this is directly from NREL's Cambium database documentation that explains how they come up with these emission rates.
So I see there's a mention here of a forward-looking under NREL 2025, 2050.
Yeah.
Is the intent similar to how you might project out energy costs, like we get those projections into the future for mortgages and stuff? Is that to say, hey, if the grid continues to go the way it is, it's going to reduce energy? Yeah.
Yeah. So when you look at the Cambium database documentation, you'll see they have a number of different scenarios. So in terms of what we use for the CO2 index, we use the low renewable energy cost scenario, and we use the levelized month-hour long-run marginal emission rates. So the long-run marginal emission rate for CO2 is the forward-looking projection. They're anticipating under a number of different scenarios, including high-cost renewables. Maybe renewable energy is not going to continue to decrease, but say it increases. They use these different scenarios to estimate what the emission rates will be under any given set of circumstances. And so so for example, if we chose to use the short run marginal emission rates, we would essentially be predicting CO2 emissions based on the current makeup of the grid. So what the Cambium database does is project out under different scenarios what the grid may look like in terms of the makeup of different fuels, whether it's natural gas or nuclear or various different types of renewable energy. What does the grid look like, and what's the impact on the emissions based on that? So in our case, we're using the 2021 Cambium database, and we also include both the pre-combustion and the combustion in the CO2 emissions. So pre-combustion is going to account for, extraction of, say, natural gas, processing, and transport. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the 134 regions that they refer to as balancing areas are included in that. And then the CO2e is basically a combination of CO2, methane, and nitrous oxides. And it uses the 100-year global warming potential from the IPCC, so the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the 6th assessment report. That's part of the Cambium documentation as well. So if you're interested in learning more about Cambium, you can just Google NREL Cambium database, and they have where this graph you see on the right came from their viewer. You can go into their viewer and select various different types of scenarios and what types of data you're looking for, whether it's CO2 equivalent or you're looking for, energy use estimates or loads and things like that. They have a number of different data points you can look at within the database. So FSEC has done some modeling in their energy gauge software, and they modeled the homes in Detroit, Nashville, Baltimore, Miami, Duluth, and Sacramento. And this is the weighted annual hourly long range marginal emission rates. And it's important to note these. You can see the Duluth and Sacramento down here at the bottom with basically the lowest CO2 emissions, and then Detroit, Nashville, and Baltimore kind of up at the higher end. Right across the middle here, this blue dashed line is natural gas. So it's important to take note of Duluth and Sacramento and the natural gas line, because on the next slide you'll see the impact that has on the CO2 index. So part of the modeling that FSEC did, they had 4 different test cases. So gas, electric, just high efficiency. So HE is high efficiency. They've modeled this using high efficient equipment, appliances, and lighting. And then the gas and electric PV takes the high efficiency case and adds in a 4 kilowatt PV system to that. So you can see, Detroit, Nashville, Baltimore, and Miami are all kind of fairly close across these 4 test cases for each of those cities. But then when you get to Duluth and Sacramento, where you have very low electric grid emission rates, but when you look at the gas test cases, so the blue and the gray lines here, you can see that those CO2 index scores go way up over 160 in Duluth and close to that point in Sacramento. And this is because that as I mentioned at the beginning, that reference home is going to be an all electric home. So the electric emissions in those 2 cities are very low. And so when you add in the natural gas component, which you saw here right across the middle at 150 pounds per million BTU of CO2 emissions, you can start to see how the use of natural gas in those areas that have rather efficient grids in terms of CO2 emissions really significantly increases the impact that has on the CO2 index. So that's this is an example that was modeled by FSEC in terms of actual implementation. So RESNET software is still implementing the CO2 index. I expect that it will probably be we can go look and see how these homes are performing on the CO2 index, because it is going to be required to be included on the rating certificate for every rating. So it will be something it will be a data point that we have on every HERS rating in the registry. And essentially, basically, to calculate the CO2 index, it's the CO2 emissions of the rated home divided by the emissions for the reference home times 100, and that gives you your CO2 index. Now, I also want to point out this new rated home label on the right side of the screen. RESNET just launched this in March. It's available for every home in the RESNET registry, and it'll give you your index scores for the HERS index, for HERS H2O for water, and also the carbon index. And it'll also identify what ratings and certifications the home has. And also, I noticed a few of you from Passive House on the CEUS certified project will be a certification that's added to this. It's been added to the label now, and it should be implemented fully within the registry in a few months. So for homes that have achieved the CEUS certification, that will be included on this label as well.
Ryan, so I know when it comes to home storage and batteries, You can, one of the intention of those is, besides having backup power when the grid goes down, is also to shift the load of the power to lower carbon times, right? That's the intention of it. So will there be an opportunity to sort of design in a system that can be rated? So if someone has one of these batteries and it's set up appropriately, it could be flagged in this system like, oh yeah, the battery has been set up to, right, not run the home off the grid during peak times. Therefore, the carbon index could be even better. I mean, is that an opportunity that's going to be looked at for this?
Yes, it is. And so actually with the, after we kind of develop the carbon index as it stands now, there's additional kind of opportunities were triggered from that we saw coming, but haven't been fully implemented yet. So, time of use, grid interconnected, say heat pump water heaters, are one example.
Yeah.
And there is some work being done on battery storage. We don't currently account for battery storage in Standard 301, but there is some work being done to be able to account for that and what impact it might have on the HERS index and also on the carbon index. FSEC has done some modeling on this. For those not familiar with the acronym FSEC, it's the Florida Solar Energy Center, based out of the University of Central Florida. And they have done some modeling on the energy storage side, and found that there may be some interesting ties in terms of how it impacts the HERS and carbon index. But there's still more work to be done before something like that is finalized as an addendum to Standard 301.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up, the water heater. That's another important one. And I even think of just, our appliances now. They're, designed so that you can set them to run at lower carbon times, or smart ones can even run at that time. So will those be included at some point, maybe as part of the conversation? Like not only get an Energy Star appliance, but get one that can run on a low carbon time, right?
Yeah. There's some work being done on that now, and our energy modeling director has been doing some research on that, and we've been involved with a few different initiatives that kind of look at get more in depth in terms of time of use and kind of smart appliances.
Right. So for those who, it's important to them for ANSI compliance, someone was mentioning the ANSI 301 CO2e rating index. Is that something that you're all based off of or looking into? I'm not too familiar with it, but
yeah, that's what this is. So this is the carbon index is based on Standard 301 and the addendum that was done to Standard 301. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Great. Well, thanks for giving us a little presentation on the index.
Yep. Yeah. And like I said, in terms of being in HERS rated software a little bit later this year. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and look at HERS data trends. So this is an annual report that RESNET has released for the past 4 years. We look at different trends, typically somewhat higher level trends across all HERS ratings in a given year. And so the most recent report was just released in June. It covers all 2022 data. In this report, we typically get feedback from people that review it and would like to see additional information. So each year we've expanded it and kind of added some new features. This year we took a little bit of an expanded look at trends over time, over kind of multiple years, and also by climate zone. We also provide a snapshot of HERS H2O data, and I'll discuss that near the end. And as I mentioned, this is all HERS ratings in 2022. Before I get into that, I just want to, so everyone understands where the data comes from. The RESNET National Buildings Registry is the database of HERS ratings. It was created in 2012. The first full year of data was in 2013. We have about 2.6 million ratings in the registry. It includes a number of data fields on other programs. So we have Energy Star data, Zero Energy Ready Home data, Indoor Air Plus, HERS H2O, and WaterSense. And as I mentioned earlier, CEUS will be coming soon as another data field that we're capturing. For each home, we have in the neighborhood of 600 data fields. The original purpose of the National Buildings Registry was actually for quality assurance, so that we would, so that RESNET would know how many, ratings our different raters and QA providers were doing, so that we could ensure that they were receiving the appropriate amount of quality assurance as a percentage of those ratings. But since then, it's expanded for many other uses. So we have something called the Appraiser Portal. It's available to 3,600 licensed real estate residential appraisers. We can also populate real estate listings. We're connected with a couple of MLSs that will do that. We also use it for just energy efficient home research for both academia and industry. We use it for industry trends like I'll show you here. More and more builders are coming to us for data so that they can use it on their environmental reporting and their sustainability reporting. ESG has become very prominent, and something especially the larger publicly traded builders are essentially forced to do. And then we also do program reporting. So we share data back to EPA for Energy Star. We share data to DOE for Zero Energy Ready Homes. And then we also share with Freddie Mac, the largest purchaser of mortgages on the secondary market, as part of their green bonds program. And I'll provide a little bit more detail on that program at the end. RESNET uses a data analysis tool called Kibana. It's used for our quality assurance and data analysis. This report that we did this year is the first year when all of the analysis was conducted within Kibana. Previous reports, we had to use spreadsheets to do that analysis. Here's a look at the increase in HERS ratings from 2013 through 2022. So you can see in 2013, we had just under 150,000. In 2022, we had just shy of 338,000 homes that received a HERS rating, but we have seen year-over-year increases for each of the last 10 years. Here's a quick snapshot of what these 2022 ratings included. So when you look at the 976 HERS raters and 440 rating field inspectors, these numbers are only HERS raters that were listed as the rater of record on those ratings. Same with rating field inspectors. That does not encompass the entire universe of RESNET certified HERS raters, which, as I mentioned earlier, raters and RFIs total certified is around 3,200. But not all of them, raters and RFIs, get the certification so that they can actively do HERS ratings. Many of them will get that certification so they can use it for, say, code compliance, for example. There were 86 different quality assurance providers that submitted ratings to the registry, 110,000 Energy Star homes. The average HERS index last year was a 58. That's the same average as for 2021. We had over 10,000 unique builder names and over 600 individual rating companies included in that data last year. So here's a look at kind of how the number of HERS raters and rating field inspectors has changed from 2016 through 2022. The RFI certification, I think, launched around 2014 or 15. And so this looks at 2016 and beyond. And you can see that the number of raters that are listed as the rater of record in ratings has actually gone down as the number of RFIs has gone up. And this is largely because many of the larger rating companies are moving toward a model where RFIs are doing the bulk of the field work and raters are doing a lot of the modeling and office work. So because of that model, you see the number of RFIs increasing over time and the number of HERS raters decreasing slightly. And what's interesting about that is that as far as HERS raters go, every RFI has to work under the supervision of a HERS rater. And so all of these RFIs that are in the field have a HERS rater that they are working under. Basically, a tag team of who's modeling the work and who's doing the field inspections and testing, so that they can report back to the rater if there's any needed changes in the modeling. As I already mentioned, about 338,000 HERS ratings in 2022. There's a map in the background of where those are located. In terms of a breakdown by home type, so we have this is 2022 is pretty typical for most years. About 80% of homes are going to be single family and duplex, and about 20% are multifamily. We see that number in terms of the single family multifamily split go anywhere from 75-25 to 80-20 in most years. And here's a breakdown by climate zone. So again, we're looking at duplex, low-rise multifamily, and single family, with the bulk of the majority, at least in terms of the largest number in one climate zone, is going to be 2A, and a significant percentage of ratings within climate zones 2 and 3. So in general, HERS ratings are going to follow the trends in new construction. So where there is a lot of new construction happening, there's also tends to be a lot of HERS ratings. One data point I don't include here is the breakdown of new construction versus existing homes that are getting rated. It's typically 95% or more of HERS ratings are going to be on the new construction side. So this is something that that RESNET puts out each year. So this map here looks at the percentage of homes that were HERS rated against the number of permits that were issued in each of those states. And you can see Massachusetts, again, comes out on top, I believe for the third year in a row, with 82% of all new homes built there last year getting a HERS rating. But we actually had a record this year of 8 states that had more than 50% of their homes receive a HERS rating.
I'm shocked to see that there are states with a 0. Yep. That's really surprising. But what just overall, what's the nationwide percentage?
So nationally, if you look at the number of ratings against the number of permits issued, I think it's around 20 to 25%. If you look at it, the reason we do this analysis based on permits is because it's readily available data from the Census Bureau.
Right.
It's not the perfect comparison though, because a HERS rating gets submitted to RESNET when it's completed.
Right.
When the home is finished, versus a permit obviously comes before the home has been started. So it's not a perfect comparison, but we've been using it for several years because the data is readily available. When I looked at the national last year, if you look at the number of single family homes that were sold against the number of homes that were HERS rated, which is a little better predictor. Unfortunately, that data is not available at a state level. It's only national. It's 25%. 25% of all new homes that were sold, single family new homes sold last year, were HERS rated.
And is that remained steady? Has that grown? Has that diminished over time? I mean, the HERS rating's been around for a while. So how has that?
It's depending on the year. It's grown a little bit. We were in the 18% range, and then as high as 25 or so. And it's interesting because when you look at it, when you look at market share, right, and the way that we look at market share is what is the percentage of new construction that's getting HERS rated, and being at 25% may seem like it's a small number, but when you compare it to others that are in the construction industry, so let's say if you take the largest supplier of insulation to the residential new construction market, they supply about 10 to 15%. And that's the highest. That's the number one manufacturer of insulation that supplies the new construction market. They're in the 10 to 15% market share range.
Sure.
And so you can look at, hot water heaters. The largest supplier of hot water heaters to the residential market actually has a pretty good share. They're up in the 30% range. And then if you go outside of the construction market and you look at a company like Amazon, they have a 40%, I think, market share. And Apple, I think, has 50 to 60% of the cell phone market. So it's a good comparison. And I think actually 25% when you put it in comparison with others in the industry and what percentage of market share they have, it's actually quite competitive.
Now, California, I mean, one would think you're having a much higher number there. Is it really? I assume the Title 24 program is a separate program you're not measuring here. Is that correct?
That's exactly, yeah. So California is actually, I believe California has doubled and maybe tripled since last year, which is not much when you say it's only 6%. And the reason for that is that California has their own HERS program, and it's actually increasing now because RESNET has been working with the California Energy Commission for many years to get RESNET HERS ratings recognized in California. And we've made a lot of progress there. We're just getting ready to launch a program that will allow California raters to be trained to become RESNET HERS raters so that we can offer that in California. So we've made a lot of progress, but that number has always been low. I think a few years ago it was like 1%.
Okay.
And that's just because we don't track the 45L HERS homes.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, congratulations to Massachusetts. And since I'm in the Midwest, Indiana as well. I mean, that's a surprise to me.
Yeah, so. Indiana's been a great market. They've performed above 50% for a couple of years now. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you in lower states, like, you got some work to do. So
yeah. And the ones that are at 0% are typically going to be the very small construction markets also. Another way we can look at this is the total number of ratings in each state. And in that case, you see Texas as such a huge new construction market is the big standout. I think if you combine the next 5 states after Texas, you can just barely get up to the same number that Texas is doing. And there was about a 23% increase in HERS ratings in Texas last year. We also look at it by city. So this is specifically for single family homes. This is the top 25 cities. They represent 7 states. San Antonio came out on top. This is the 4th year that they've come out on top as the most number of HERS ratings in any one municipality. These 25 cities represent about 15% of all HERS ratings. And it's important to note that this analysis here is not based on metro area. This would look quite different, I think, if we based it on a metro area. This is specifically for homes with an address in the city that you see listed. So I'm going to switch now, and we're going to get into some of the components that are included in this analysis. So here's a look at foundation types. This is, slabs have been far and away the number one foundation type in terms of a national percentage for new construction. So it's no surprise that most builders are building on slab. We also look at wall insulation, though this is just a snapshot of cavity versus continuous insulation. So this is for homes that have cavity only. About 84% of homes have cavity only, and about 16% have a combination of cavity and continuous, or depending on the construction type, for say like a CMU wall, they may have continuous only. This number has actually increased though. Over the 2021 percentage, I think the share of continuous insulation has gone up about 7% compared to last year, or compared to the 2021 data. this is a look at above grade wall insulation. So this is specifically U values of the wall assembly, looking over 6 years from 2017 through 2022. This is roughly equivalent to an R value improvement of about R14 to an R17, so about an R3 over time in terms of averages across wall assemblies over the last 6 years. Here's a similar look, but this is breaking it down by climate zone. The red dot that you see on each of these columns is going to be the 2018 IECC U factor requirement from Chapter 4. I've provided that just kind of as a point of reference because we're looking at an entire climate zone. We don't know what specific state they may be in or what code might be in effect at that, during when this home was built. But this is just a look at where the average wall value U assembly it falls in terms of the different climate zones and in comparison to what the code would require in that climate zone. We also did a little look at 2x4 versus 2x6 stud walls. So about 60%, a little over 60% of HERS rated homes last year used 2x4 walls, about 40% or so a 2x6 or greater than a 2x6 wall. We also look at radiant barriers. Here's a breakdown for each of the 3 different home types. The blue is going to be ratings that have a radiant barrier, and orange is going to be all ratings in that particular home type. So you can see for multifamily and duplex, the use of radiant barriers is pretty low, but in single family, it's about a third of all ratings we're using a radiant barrier. We did see some drops in these numbers in 2020 and 2021 data because of the supply issues around builders being able to get the radiant barrier materials. So but in general, about a third of single family homes using radiant barriers. Here's a look at ceiling insulation. Again, the red dot is the 2018 IECC requirements. This is breakdown by climate zone. For these climate zone graphs, where there's a climate zone that has very few ratings, I think we did 100 or less, that we've just excluded that particular climate zone. We also look at windows. One thing that's interesting about windows is this, the values, the U value and SHGC have actually been kind of remarkably stable over time. I did some analysis to see how the window U value and SHGC has changed over many years, and it basically just tells you that it hasn't changed much in terms of the number of windows in these different ranges of SHGC and U values has been pretty stable for the last at least 5 years. So you can see that 51% of windows fall between a 0.31 and a 0.35, and about 57% between a 0.2 and 0.25 on SHGC. If you look at the full report, you can also see a breakdown of windows by climate zone. Envelope leakage rates is always a fun one to look at. So this is just a look at single family versus multifamily envelope leakage rates. You can see 80% of single family homes are going to fall between 2 and 5 ACH 50. We also look at that by climate zone as well. As a point of reference for climate zones 1 and 2, all the way over on the left, the IECC code requirement is going to be 5 ACH, and for all the other climate zones 3 plus, it's going to be a 3 ACH requirement in the code.
Ryan, I know the industry is moving towards compartmentalization. So ACH, or I'm sorry, CFM 50 per enclosure, like the wall, the shell. I know the air leakage reports and your vendors produce this data.
Yep.
LEED requires these numbers, not for energy, but for health reasons, because they don't want air moving in the compartmentalization. So my question is, will you be shifting with the industry? It seems like we're shifting away from ACH towards, it's like it usually ends up being like 0.3 or 0.25. Do you all see having new reports kind of reporting that out in these?
Yeah, we actually do. We do have that data in the registry. Actually, the CFM data.
Yeah.
We typically report ACH 50 just because of the comparison to the code requirements.
Sure.
That's largely why we've done that. But we do have the CFM data as well.
Yeah.
It's just hasn't been as interesting because you can't compare it against. Well, you can start. There are some multifamily code that allows for that now in terms of CFM. But yeah, we do have the CFM, and we just typically have reported ACH 50 for code purposes.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, we're a conversation far ahead of the code, but still the slim minority. So
yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, and I wasn't saying get rid of ACH, just in addition to, but
yeah, we do have it. We do have that the CFM numbers in addition to the ACH. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yep. We also look at ventilation systems. So here you're going to see breakdown blue single family, orange multifamily. The most popular ventilation type was just exhaust only, followed by supply only. But the third one is CFIS. So that's a central fan integrated system. So where you have your ventilation system connected to your air handler in some way. That's what that's referring to. Air cycler we used to call it air cycler in the registry, but that's a proprietary system. So we've changed it to the generic term now. But I think one of the most important things to note in comparing the 2022 against 2021 is that in 2021, the second most common ventilation type was none. So we are moving at least in a direction that we're starting to better address ventilation. At least the raters are including something as opposed to just saying there's no ventilation.
For CFIS, is that balanced ventilation, as in it's bringing in as much fresh air as it's exhausting? Because otherwise, it sounds like the way you described it is it's just a supply system on the furnace. So.
Yeah, that would be a balanced system. We do have another data point in the registry for a balanced system, but I think that in terms of what gets inputted, I don't know if I wouldn't say that every CFI system is balanced, but that is the intent of those. We do have a separate data point on balanced, but we, in the process of rebuilding our registry over the last year, that I didn't feel confident in that data point, so I didn't include it in here.
And that's balanced non-recovery, right? So
right.
You mean that's an additional item? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. That's not one term I've ever heard. So thanks.
Yep. Furnace and air conditioner efficiencies. So for furnace efficiency, about 45% of homes that had a fuel-fired furnace used a standard efficiency furnace, meaning less than a 90 AFUE. And on the air conditioner side, we've seen kind of the similar trend that we've seen for several years now, which is 14 and 16 SEER tend to be the most commonly used air conditioner efficiencies. 15 has actually grown a little bit, although I've heard that 15 is more commonly used on the retrofit side. Not sure how true that is, but 14 and 16 SEER seem to be the most common as far as single family. What's interesting about looking at ratings in terms of furnace efficiencies is that you can really start to see the geographical trend in where these systems are being installed. So this is a look at homes that had a less than a 90 AFUE furnace, so a standard efficiency gas furnace, and you can see that almost all of them are installed in southern climates. And kind of the same thing if we went and looked at where are the high efficient ones installed, and you can see that the high efficient furnaces are getting installed in the cold climates, which obviously makes sense in terms of energy impact. Then we also look at heating fuel type. So when it comes to multifamily, actually, it's about a 50-50 split, electric versus gas. But on the single family side, about 69% of homes use natural gas. And we've seen that number decreasing year over year, and the electric number going up year over year. I think just between 2021 and 2022, the percentage of homes using a natural gas heating source decreased by about 6%. So you're definitely seeing a trend toward electric and away from natural gas. I think the natural gas, just a few years ago, the natural gas split was about 80% of heating fuel type was natural gas. But it's interesting to see what happens if you start looking at homes that are hitting really efficient HERS scores. So this is a look at homes that are using natural gas in these two different ranges of HERS scores. So you can see that homes that are scoring a 40 or less, has a very small number of those are using natural gas as their heating fuel source, whereas basically homes that are scoring a 41 or higher, that's where the bulk of those homes that are using natural gas is coming from. And we've looked at this in a number of different angles. Back in 2020, we did the 2020 HERS data trends report includes a special section on net zero analysis. And so we got into more detail there in looking at what do the fuel and equipment trends look like as we get to homes that are achieving or very close to achieving a net zero rating. So we did look at all electric homes as well. There was just over 64,000 homes, and that actually that's the 2021 number. The 2022 number is actually significantly higher. It's about 20,000 more than that. And there were 83 all-electric homes in Michigan in 2022. The 2022 split for all-electric homes is actually about 23% of all HERS ratings were all-electric last year. So we also look at the use of solar. California, although they come out very low in percentage of homes receiving a RESNET rating, they come out on top in terms of the number of homes using solar. This is because of their new construction requirement for builders to use solar. In total, there were about 7,700 homes that had solar installed. The average HERS index score for homes that had solar was a 22. The average HERS index before accounting for solar, so just the efficiency component, was a 48 on average. Here's a look at just the number of HERS rated homes by year going back to 2018. You can see there's been a steady increase, but when you look at it, this is just strictly based on numbers. If you look at this based on percentages, because there's also been an increase in the number of HERS ratings over this time, on a percentage basis, HERS in terms of the number of HERS homes that are using solar has stayed fairly steady over the last 5 years. So that was everything on HERS. I'm going to just do a couple slides here on HERS H2O. If you're not familiar with it, HERS H2O is a whole house water efficiency rating. It's built on RESNET's ANSI Standard 850. You can use HERS H2O to achieve the WaterSense label under version 2 of WaterSense. So version 1 of WaterSense has been sunset. That was a prescriptive option Version 2 of WaterSense is a performance-based approach. You can achieve a HERS H2O score of 70 or less to qualify. Then you need to install WaterSense labeled showers, bathroom faucets, and toilets in order to be certified as a WaterSense labeled home. The nice thing about HERS H2O is that it's very easy to add it to a HERS rating. The final inspection for HERS H2O can be done at the same time as a HERS rating, and there's no like pre-drywall component to the HERS H2O. It's just a final inspection. It is applicable to both new and existing homes. But currently, as far as multifamily goes, this current standard 850 only addresses 1 and 2 family dwellings. Multifamily is going to be incorporated in the second version of that standard, which should be out in 2024. In 2022, we had about 2,200 HERS H2O ratings. This is only the second. 2022 was actually the first full year of doing HERS H2O ratings that launched in 2021. The average HERS H2O score was a 61. We have currently 26 RESNET accredited HERS H2O providers, and very close to 300. I think actually that now that we're halfway through 2023, I think that number is a bit over 300 in terms of HERS H2O certified raters. And then lastly, I want to wrap up with the 45L tax credit and some mortgage incentives. So the 45L tax credit has been extended through 2032 under the Inflation Reduction Act. The tax credits available are $2,500 per home. That's for Energy Star single family homes. That took effect in January of this year. If the home is certified for Zero Energy Ready, it's you can get $5,000 per home. Again, that took effect on January 1. The nice thing about the extension of the tax credit is that for the first time, builders can really start to bake this into their planning process. In the past, 45L has almost always been extended retroactively. So builders never knew going into the year if they were going to be able to, if Congress would reauthorize 45L for that year or the previous year. So they couldn't really account for it so easily within their planning process. But now that it's been extended through 2032 and it has the Energy Star and the Zero Energy Ready requirement, it's a bit more tangible for builders what they have to do to achieve that tax credit. And on the multifamily side, it can be $500 per unit. Now, something that's probably a little bit less known is the green mortgage-backed securities. So both Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae have what they refer to as green mortgage-backed securities or green bonds. These are available to mortgage lenders, including the mortgage subsidiaries of builders. Many of the large production builders have their own mortgage subsidiary, and they can sell loans to Fannie and Freddie for a premium. Fannie Mae program requires Energy Star certification. It's available for all single family homes. The Freddie Mac program requires a HERS index score of 60 or less, and that's also available for all single family homes. So it's a little bit, RESNET was originally started decades ago to get energy efficiency accounted for in the mortgage process. And that's been one of the most difficult things to achieve. But at least now we're starting to see this accounted for in the secondary mortgage market, which is really helpful. And obviously on the consumer market, there are energy efficient mortgages, not as easy to find as many of us would hope, but they do exist on the consumer side of the market. And then finally, I just want to close out. The RESNET conference is going to be in person this year, in person only. Actually, there will be no hybrid or virtual component. It's going to be in San Diego from November 15th to the 17th. If you're interested, you can get more information at the web link below and register there as well. And with that, I will take questions.
Great, Ryan. Well, thanks for going through all of this. And just real quick before we get into those questions, as a reminder, for those of you who want to or miss some of this session, want to rewatch it or share it, post it on social media. We will have it posted up on our YouTube channel, so you can subscribe there, get an instant update when it is available, and catch the recording or rewatch it. For those of you watching this in the future, not right now, but on demand, make sure to take your quiz with an 80% passing rate, and you will receive your CEU certificate. For those of you watching this now, make sure to mark certs at gutenbergcerts.com as safe, and you will receive your CEUs. And before we get into all the questions coming up, again, I just need to thank our board of directors, all of our volunteers, our executive director, Jose Reyna, and our top tier sponsors, and all of our sponsors who have products that are going to help you achieve lower HERS index ratings. Mitsubishi heat pump air source systems that work in cold weather climates, Rheem heat pump water heaters, all of them are going to help you lower your ratings and improve your projects. So Ryan, I wanted to go back to 45L. It's on everyone's minds. And I'm personally kind of struggling with it a little bit, because I'm starting to see that perhaps now, at first it seemed like a program that was really only for your big time tract home builders, right? Who are just cranking out lots of homes. Now it seems to maybe have been retooled so that a homeowner who is commissioning a build and, has an ownership basis into the project, and these are all legal terms, perhaps could, get that. Is that true? I mean, what, from your basis, what are you hearing out there? What are you seeing?
No, I don't believe that a homeowner could get the tax credit.
Okay.
It is really it is meant as a builder tax credit, because one of the requirements in getting the 45L is that it basically has to, the home has to be sold. Or otherwise, have a change in ownership. So a builder that's doing build for rent could get the tax credit because they built the home, and then at the point that it was rented out, whatever year that is, that's when the home's eligible for that tax credit. So when the home is conveyed, that's what basically qualifies it for the tax credit at that point.
Okay, so if the homeowner has got a mortgage, doing a construction financing, hiring a builder, they're not the builder, they're not the ones that's could be reciprocal of this benefit, correct?
No, I've never heard of any homeowner being able to receive the tax credit, even if it's the case that they were, acting as a, general contractor for
even
to build their own home.
Okay.
Yeah, to build their own. I'm not even sure that it's available to them, but as I've learned in dealing with tax laws, I'm not a tax professional.
Right. Yeah. We're all, obviously consult your tax advisor on everything we say here, asterisks, make sure we say that. It's just trying to get a sense. The other question that came up here from our good friend, Steve, is, from a nonprofit perspective, right? Nonprofits, a lot of them are building affordable housing. Without our nonprofit sector, we wouldn't get a lot of housing into people in need. It doesn't look like they can also benefit from these unless they can somehow reassign these credits. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, I've heard that question before, and I've not heard an answer for it. I don't, if there's an answer, I don't know if it's an easy one. I think it depends on the relationship of the nonprofit in the construction process. So I don't think that you could, unless they are the builder, I don't feel like they could claim any type of credit for that.
Right. Well, and I have heard, it's been fixed for low-income housing tax credit projects. So these nonprofits can assign these funds to their tax advisors. And in the past, it used to harm their low-income housing tax credit, but now it doesn't. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. So
Yeah.
I haven't seen any evidence of that yet. We're still early, right?
Yeah.
And we haven't went through a tax year yet. But anyway, that's just, I wanted to kind of put out there what I was, hearing in the field. So
Yeah. I mean, what I think could be possible and what I've heard happening versus what some tax professionals can come up with when they interpret the statute. It surprises me sometimes.
Right. Yeah. You get a very different conversation from your professional.
Yeah. There's a lot of nuances on how it can be applied.
Yeah. So we'll keep having that conversation. And if anyone learns of anyone, let us know and we'll get the word out if they're willing to talk. So, so that leads me into a question that came up. And so, of course, if you can't rely on federal tax credits, perhaps you've got a utility program or incentive out there. I know of one in Michigan that's giving out incentives for lower HERS ratings, and I'm sure that's the case across the country.
Yep.
So the general question was, how is RESNET partnering with utilities to, get incentives out for lower rated homes or rated homes in general?
Yeah, so we have a number of different ways that we partner with utilities, and sometimes utilities will create a program and we'll never know about it.
Right.
That happens, but we do offer to share. There's the number of utilities that we actually share data back with them, so that they can verify that the homes that participate in their program are in the registry and appropriately qualified, to receive their rebate incentive. So that's one of the ways that we can work with utilities, is to be able to, when we do have we actually created an API a couple of years ago that we can share with utility program administrators that will give them data back on the home where they can get detailed data. So yeah, that's one way that we've worked with them. We've done some, cross promotion of utility programs. But in general, I think for utilities to be able to get the data and verify that the home should have, received their rebate is one of the most beneficial.
Yeah. And that kind of gets into the question that came up, someone was like, what the heck's going on in Indiana there? Obviously Massachusetts beats them out even more, but, and maybe the question really is, for those who are looking at these states who are doing very well, what is the secret that they can take if they want to start growing the programs, energy rating programs in their state? Is it, I look at like maybe Massachusetts and maybe it's incentivized. I look at Indiana, maybe there's a situation where, when you have a code that's, and I don't know too much about the code, but I know it's not as great as Michigan. When you have lack of codes or lesser codes, are people using the HERS index to differentiate themselves? Like, what is the magic out there, and what can people do to drive the score more?
Yeah, that's a good question, and one that we get often. And I've looked at what are some of the drivers in different states. And in Massachusetts, it's their Green Communities program that requires a HERS index. But for other places, in some cases, it is a utility incentive that's driving HERS ratings to happen. There are good utility incentives in Idaho, and we've seen some increase there. Another one is just market forces, because you have especially because it's on the new construction side, when you have a large production builder that goes into a market, and typically they're going to go into that market because it's they see the potential of selling homes there, and they are doing HERS ratings, and they're actively promoting them. Then you put some pressure on other builders that somebody goes to their competitor and then comes to them and says, well, what's the HERS score on your home? And they don't have one. Right. So in some of the markets, it's just market forces that are driving it. Other places, it's code or other programs or utility incentives.
Yeah. Are there, if I understand right, there are some places that accept these ratings for the code compliance. Is that true? Like, you're just, yeah.
So that's correct. Yeah. In some cases, in some cases you still have to meet the mandatory item requirements. It's not just a straight HERS score, but the mandatory item requirements would still be required. So Texas passed the law. Recently, we just completed a big education campaign there with the Home Builders Association, but their state law allows for a HERS score to be used anywhere in the state as an alternative compliance option, and there are mandatory requirements on that as well.
Okay. Now, getting into some of the components of the HERS ratings, there was a clarification question when you brought up solar. They just wanted to make sure when you were talking about homes with solar, you were talking about photovoltaic and not thermal, or was it including both?
Yeah, no, only PV.
Yeah.
Yep, only PV.
I don't think we really see thermal very often anymore these days.
No.
So, what other kind of components, are you seeing as far as homes that are performing, I guess, better, lower on the rating index? Is that something you all look at and report out as well?
Yeah. As I mentioned, in 2020, we had a whole special section in that data trends report that included, a look at net zero homes, how they're performing, what kind of fuel types they're using, efficiencies and insulation levels and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, very commonly we're seeing for homes that are getting close to net zero or achieving net zero, are going to be all electric. That's definitely the most common. I think for the ones that may have a combustion fuel source, it's likely a backup type system or a dual fuel system. So that's definitely common. Heat pump water heaters are very common as we start looking. I think the 2020 numbers were somewhere around 50% or more of homes that achieve net zero had a heat pump water heater. So we're seeing the prevalence of those really come into play when you get toward net zero efficiency.
Yeah. So one of the things I know we've had to do in the past for projects that were all electric and solar, especially when it's LEED, is we were using the alternative approach, which is called the LEED energy budget. Now, to be sure, that's not some special tool someone can go use. It's being generated in the RESNET programs or the ERI programs. So it's part of those programs, and it's just an addendum report. But we had to use that budget to actually get people more points, because what we were finding, especially in cold weather states with high carbon grids and high cost grids, is that the HERS rating actually is based on cost and not necessarily energy savings, at least from what we were seeing. And so what would happen was you would have, these high electric rates and low gas rates. And so people, when they were doing their modeling, might fare better with gas. Has that been, I guess, fixed? I mean, this is a while ago, and I haven't seen that as much of an issue, but is that still true? Like, I mean, if you're modeling, your numbers are really based on those cost inputs going in. Is that true?
So in terms of the performance of gas versus electric,
and like the end HERS number.
Yeah, so the final HERS number is not impacted by cost. So you can enter whatever the utility rate is going to be. And it will estimate your annual energy cost, but it's not going to impact the HERS score. It may impact decisions. If you have a low gas cost versus a high electric cost, it may impact choices in the design process. It's not going to impact the score. Now, in terms of electric versus gas performance on the HERS index, they're close, but gas tends to perform a little bit better, have a little bit lower score versus if you just, swap out a gas furnace for an electric one or for a heat pump. So it's a slight variation, and I've heard this kind of anecdotally from raters as well, that they and I don't do modeling. I look at all the data on the back end, so I can see how they perform, but I don't use the modeling software. Okay, so there is some truth to saying the gas do perform better on the HERS,
But with that contrast, it seems all the lower rated homes have electric, right?
Are using electric. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gas may perform a little better, but it's a couple of points. It's not like, you know, you're
Right.
not going to save 10 points by switching to gas. It's typically a couple of points, but
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
in this process, we're working with the energy modeling director and our accredited software to look at how heat pumps are modeled.
Right.
And I think there are some improvements in how we can model heat pumps. Not to say it's like, you know, it's gonna change, you know, what that difference is, but there's, as heat pumps have evolved, there is a need to be able to better model them in the software.
Right. Right. Yeah. Some other questions that came in on the water component was, you know, one of them had to do with, you know, how you're handling leak testing in cold climates where irrigation and landscaping isn't installed at the time of closing for half the year. And I'll say from a lead perspective, sometimes we're waiting on irrigation for many years. So yeah.
That is a tough one. If the irrigation's not installed at the time of closing, you wouldn't be able to do the rating. The HERS H2O rating and what's in standard 850 requires that at a minimum the front yard be landscaped or finished. However the builder's going to, you know, sell the home, that it be finished. And that's a requirement because so many homes in the Southwest, the builder only finishes the front yard and the homeowner's responsible to, you know, deal with the dirt in the backyard essentially. So if the home is not, you wouldn't be able to receive the H2O rating until the front yard at a minimum is completed.
Do you know if homes with PEX pipes, more water volume, less water diameter pipes, and according to this commenter, which have less potential for leak points and are easier to inspect more visibly, end up showing up as improvements in the HERS H2O rating?
Not specifically. So what's going to improve your HERS H2O rating, the primary data point as it relates to kind of plumbing design is going to be the distance from your hot water heater to the furthest fixture that consumes hot water. So to the extent that you've reduced that distance, you can improve your score. But beyond that, there's no other accounting for you know, for the volume of water in pipes. I mean, yeah, that's pretty much true because it's just going to be that distance of your fixture. Yeah.
So it's probably fair to say that a lot of these water conservation benefits that would improve your water rating are also improving your HERS rating, correct? I mean, you kind of get a 2-for-1 on that side.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Sure. So we're going to, you know, account for, you know, on the HERS side, actually the HERS H2O rating came out of the development of improved energy calculations for hot water.
Okay.
So that's where HERS H2O got its start essentially. And so, yeah, there's an impact there on water usage and energy usage on the HERS side.
Yeah. And then just a couple of clarification questions that came in here is you had mentioned percentage of HERS rated to sold homes. If I understand correctly, you were just using that as an example, but what you were showing on your chart was just homes that the permits were pulled, because someone was saying, well, what if the home wasn't sold, then it wouldn't have shown up, and just clarifying.
To clarify that, so what we're looking at in that analysis, we take the number of HERS ratings for 2022 by state and for single family, and then we look at the number of permits issued in that state also for single family. I think we include duplex also, but it's a very small number either way. And so that's what we're comparing, the number of HERS ratings that were completed against the permits. That's why I said it's not a perfect comparison, because, you know, the HERS ratings done when the home is completed, it's submitted to RESNET after the home has been completed, and a permit is for new construction that hasn't started yet. So it's not a perfect comparison, but it's the only data set that we have available that we can do that, because the Census Bureau publishes the number of new homes sold but only by region and nationally. They don't have it at a state level.
Mm-hmm. And when, just to clarify, a reminder again, where does that CO2, when is that the CO2 index report supposed to be showing up?
Yeah, so for Ecotrope and REMRate, I'm hoping it's available before the end of this year. But if you're a rater out there waiting on it, tell them to tell them to pick it up and get it implemented quickly, because my hope is that later this year, before the end of the year, it will be available in software.
Okay. And then just as a reminder, you were saying people can get involved in the embodied carbon standard,
yes.
I believe. And so, and I guess this is just an overall question, but, where can people go to learn more about, getting involved in these technical committees, or, reach out to you about that, or anything related to the HERS index rating and RESNET?
Yeah, so we have on RESNET.us, we have on the About Us page, we have a whole standards section that documents all of our standards, all of our addendum, public comment periods, and things like that. So you can learn more about the standards there. In terms of the new embodied carbon standard, I don't think we have, that hasn't actually started development yet. If someone is interested in serving on either the standard development committee or the technical committee, they should just shoot me an email, ryan@resnet.us, and I can give them what's required to submit their name for that.
Great, Ryan. Well, we are at the end of our time. Thanks for sticking around a little bit longer with us. And it's great to have you back on the show. And we appreciate your time and RESNET for having you out. So thanks again for joining us. Thanks for you all for joining us. We'll be back again on our next event next week. So hope you'll join us. Take care, everyone, and be well. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Be sure to check out all of our courses available online that you can watch anytime and anywhere to pick up your CEUs. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to get weekly updates and stay up to date on green building science courses, webinars, and home tours. Thanks again.